I believe that at the heart of every relationship, it's regardless of your preference and gender, your identity, it comes down to wanting to feel understood and being able to express your needs and having those needs met.
Welcome to Millennial, the home of pretend adulting and real talk. I'm Andrew.
I'm Laura.
And I'm Pamela.
And this week, we're going to be joined by a relationship coach, Kim Polinder, to talk to us about dating and maintaining relationships in this modern world. So that is coming up in a little bit. But first of all, a check-in on the first 100 days of the Trump administration. We're halfway there, y'all. At least halfway through the first 100 days. We're up to day 50. And I know one of the most important things to many millennials is TikTok. So I wanted to check in on the status of TikTok because, as everybody might remember, Donald Trump temporarily sort of kind of saved TikTok right around when he took office 50 days ago. And he did that by issuing an executive order granting a 75-day extension on the Biden law that was supposed to, well, it was set to basically shut down TikTok in the US. But now that 75-day extension is nearing its end. Specifically, April 5th is when it expires. So what is happening with TikTok? Is TikTok going to be okay after April 5th? Well, Bloomberg is reporting that Oracle, this is a big tech company, is reportedly in the lead to save TikTok from the US ban. They are closing in on a deal that would have Oracle vouch for TikTok's security in exchange for a small stake in the company's US operations. And this plan, which apparently has been discussed among the Trump administration over the last week, would include guarantees that an updated US version of TikTok would not contain a backdoor that China's government could exploit. The thing is, though, the deal may still leave the app's algorithm with TikTok's China-based parent company ByteDance. China does not want to give up that algorithm come hell or high water. A source told Bloomberg that China is aware of the potential deal and that the country's authorities will only approve the deal if TikTok's algorithm remains fully under China's control, which doesn't really sound very assuring. And it's also not clear if this proposal would even hold up against Biden's law that required applications that are controlled by foreign adversaries to divest their U.S. operations. What do y'all think is going to happen? Is TikTok going to disappear come April 5th, at least temporarily?
Oh, I definitely think they will take it down temporarily for literally the headlines and the attention that it generates, just so they can bring it back and give another big thank you to President Trump and whoever ultimately buys them. I think they're going to do what they did before.
Yeah, it was a big moment for them, not just outside of TikTok, but also on TikTok too. People were posting up a storm thinking that this was going to be the last few hours. And so, yeah, regardless of the PR stunt for the Trump administration, if they were to go dark again and then put up some bullshit statement about how Donald Trump single-handedly saved TikTok or whatever.
Thanks to the efforts of President Trump, I believe the message said.
Exactly. They would still get a huge push of content.
Yeah. This roller coaster isn't healthy for the creators on the platform either. I mean, a lot of people tie their livelihoods, and they shouldn't, but they do tie their livelihoods primarily to TikTok. So their businesses could be upended. And of course, a lot of small businesses, and TikTok tries to argue this, so I sound like I'm parroting their talking points, but a lot of small businesses across the country and world rely on their TikToks going viral to sell their products. So this has an impact on people in a lot of different ways.
Right.
And I just want to see them get banned again, because I think back to that message about Trump saving TikTok. And then it would be a nice little egg on his face, expensive egg on his face. So that's what's happening there.
Well, we'll keep an eye on it for sure. I don't know. I really did enjoy the final hours of TikTok last time because people were making all kinds of confessions. So maybe we'll get that again this time. And also, I think it was pretty entertaining to see how the rest of the world reacted to America being off the app for like 12 hours.
Yeah, apparently it was really quiet without us. So
yeah, we're the life of the party. Apparently, that's what I'm hearing.
We create all the good stuff. We
Yeah.
might be a mess politically, but we've got creating TikToks down pat.
Well, I know we were all on pins and needles last Friday with the quarterly government shutdown looming. And just to be clear here, there was no good outcome to Friday. Government shutdowns wreak havoc on everything. But this bill, which has now passed the Senate, paves the way for gutting of Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, lots of social programs we all contribute to and ultimately will depend on for the most part at some point in time. And they're not going to pass the savings from these cuts back to us. They're going to funnel them towards $4 trillion in tax cuts for their rich friends. And that really, really sucks. And Senate Democrats should have gone down fighting over this instead of rolling over the way they did. Thank you, Chuck Schumer. I really hope you get primaried. I'm so excited that people have been openly talking about the need to retire Chuck Schumer because he has lost the plot.
But Laura, he had to get it done because he has a new book coming out. So he needed to go focus on his new book tour.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Tell me you're not thinking about the country without telling me you're not thinking about the country. I'm just over it. Basically, Chuck and the 9 other Democrats who voted for this continuing resolution, primary them all. I'm over it.
Yeah.
We also got a Russia-Ukraine ceasefire agreement. We'll see how this one goes. I kind of wonder if this is going to be like the other 5 that Putin violated. Or can Trump change him?
I can fix him.
Right. Like, daddy, I can fix him. We're daddy. Trump is like, no, really. He's a nice guy. Just look in his eyes. I don't feel super hopeful here, but we'll keep an eye on it. And this actually just broke right before we started recording. A federal judge ruled for the immediate reopening of USAID or USAID. And that Doge likely violated the Constitution by shutting it down. What's really, really cool about this is that USAID employees spearheaded this by filing lawsuits against Doge for the rapid dismantling of their department, which is just like chef's kiss. You literally used the system as it should be used to fight back against this shit. And it worked.
Yeah.
Now, we'll see if it fully worked insofar as like, what does it look like for the department to get reopened? And like, are there going to be like concerted efforts from the Trump administration to make that harder for them to operate? Still a lot of questions there, but it just feels really good to see a really major cut that came out of Doge and their like chainsaw gutting of the federal government, to see it, really get pushed back on by the judiciary.
Yeah, the judicial branch continues to basically keep Trump at bay. Also, just breaking right before we recorded, a judge blocked Trump's policy that would have expelled transgender troops, which was absolutely ridiculous and insulting to these people who were serving our country. So, yeah, I mean, for every awful headline, it almost feels like a 1-to-1 ratio. It's probably not, but it feels like a 1-to-1 ratio where every time Trump does something outrageous, a judge is overturning it. So at least there's that.
Yeah.
All right.
We're joined today by relationship coach Kim Polinder. Kim is the founder of the Polinder Coaching Group, where the goal is to help both couples and individuals strengthen their communication skills in an effort to build better understandings of each other and also to care for each other better in their relationships. So welcome to Millennial, Kim. Thanks so much for joining us.
So much for having me.
To start things off, I wanted to ask you, how long have you been in the business of being a relationship coach? When did that start for you?
I've been coaching for about 12 years now, and rather early on, couples started coming to me, and in the beginning I thought, I do not know anything about couples coaching, relationship communication skills, that sort of thing, so I just dove into research and training and learned it on the fly. And since then, I've really enjoyed the challenge of it. I don't think there's anything more challenging than trying to resolve conflict between two people who are living in an intimate situation and love each other very much, but still are affected by trauma from their past. So
yeah, that sounds really intense, honestly. What kind of relationships are coaching and counseling for? Like, is it mostly for romantic couples, or is it for like any kind of relationship? What kind of couples do you tend to see?
mostly romantic, but whether married or just dating in a committed relationship. It could be early on. It could be I've had couples come to me 25, 30 years into their marriage. And it's also sometimes family. I'll get a mother, daughter, or siblings. That's more rare. I have had one situation with business partners.
Oh,
But
wow.
for the most part, it's romantic.
So if we ever have issues, we know we can come to you now.
That's right. That's right. Mediate.
Exactly. So is it a common misconception that people really only come to you as a last resort, or do you see people coming in just as a preventative measure as well?
Majority for sure are people who are 1 foot out the door, perhaps on their last leg. It's like a Hail Mary. And research also supports this, where on average, couples will seek counseling maybe 5 or 6 years into the marriage.
Oh, interesting. Is there a reason why? Like that tends to be the benchmark? Is it because things have kind of fizzled out, or?
I think that it depends also on a person's background, their cultural perceptions of therapy or coaching or just asking for outside help. A lot of people don't like to admit that vulnerability of needing help, don't see hope in the relationship, and then people thinking, oh, well, it'll pass or we can just work it out on our own. So it kind of varies as to the reasons why.
Is this tied at all to the 7-year itch? I've heard this phrase recently. I'd never heard about this until recently.
It could easily be tied. Personal opinion, I believe that 7-year itch is getting stronger, but it's in theory. But they do have actual research for the 6-year point in marriage and seeking counseling.
Okay. What do you mean the 7-year itch is getting stronger?
I'm very curious.
Well, 5, 6 years, you're getting into that 7-year cycle. I used to be more into energy work, and I have been certified in Reiki, and that was kind of a past life for me. But back then, people were very much interested in these cycles of, late 20s is also known as a kind of an emerging of your identity for the first time in your life, where you figure a lot of things out in your late 20s, make big decisions in your late 20s. And so along with that mindset, I suppose, comes the 7-year itch, where you kind of go in cycles of evolution, shall we say?
Well, yeah. And don't our cells renew every 7 years? And
Something like that.
Oh, look at you making the connections.
well, this was me with my therapist earlier today. She brought this up. I was like, wait, cells renew every 7 years. 7-year itch. This is all making sense. She was like, I hadn't thought about that before. I was like, oh, okay. So I'm just dropping this revelation on everybody today.
Wow, I appreciate the education. Kim, I'm wondering, what are some of the most common relationship conflicts you've seen in your profession in recent years? And kind of building off what we just spoke about regarding cycles, do the conflicts tend to come in cycles?
I would say if I were to lay out the arc of the average relationship, so you get into the honeymoon phase for 6 months, maybe a year, and then you start to feel the effects of how you've handled conflict thus far. There are people who tend to be more avoidant, where they'll just let things go, not say anything, shut down. There are people who lean a little more towards anxious traits, where they want to resolve things now and they don't want the other person to leave the room during conflict. And these patterns will kind of be set by year 3, where you'll find yourself arguing over the same things. And so in a long-term relationship, you're going to have your ups and downs, boredom, excitement, fall in love all over again, and then boredom perhaps. So there's those kinds of cycles. But when it comes to conflict, I've noticed that couples generally have the same pattern as to what they argue about and how they argue about it. And that's what tends to become frustrating and what motivates them towards that 6-year counseling cycle.
I see. And what are some of the most common conflicts that you're seeing present?
Lately, what I've seen in the last few years is because of the age of social media, where we have so much access in the phone, in our pocket, where it's so easy to cheat. It's so easy to do I guess, shady things, if you want, for lack of a better word. So many more temptations, so many more areas for like gray areas. Like, no, I just liked a post. It didn't mean anything. And back in the day, I'm 53. So back in the day, when people from my age were actually going to step outside the relationship, that took a lot of effort. You had to actually go outside your house. You had to, use a landline to arrange things. And these days it's just so easy. So with social media, I've noticed an increase in jealousy. So people who tend more towards anxious traits and worrying and feeling like the other person might lose interest or that they're going to be abandoned, it gets intensified with the whole social media culture. I've also, from the beginning, since I started working with couples, infidelity is something that comes up a lot, whether it's an emotional affair or full on goes to the physical nature of stepping outside the relationship. And that's something that isn't really talked a lot about, I think, in public. There's so much shame associated with the person who stays. But I'm telling you that, at least from the couples who've come to me, the majority of people want to work it out who've been cheated on. So it's something that's kind of worked on behind closed doors, I guess.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, that is really good to hear.
We were going to ask you if, with people meeting each other online, has the influx of online dating given rise to new challenges? And you've just been describing a couple, but are there other issues that you're noticing couples go through that maybe aren't tied to social media?
Like, are our parents' relationship issues still our relationship issues, basically? They grew up in a time when online dating was like non-existent, but like we're in like this new age.
Right. Yes, I believe that at the heart of every relationship, it's regardless of your preference and gender, your identity, it comes down to wanting to feel understood and being able to express your needs and having those needs met. So sure, with online dating, I think the way we communicate has really changed, where people ghost so easily, where you would be a little more hesitant to just not talk to someone if they're talking to you straight to your face or on the phone. So it makes communication more clunky. It makes it a little more harsh at times, the whole online world. And also, not necessarily catfishing to that extreme, but not presenting yourself as who you really are. But that happened back in the day as well, where you may put your best foot forward for the first few months and then the real self comes out. So all those patterns, they all play out at the root of it, but it just manifests in different ways and at a different pace now with the world, online dating and accessibility there.
That's super interesting. Well, speaking of the internet, one of the things that we do a lot on this show is we talk a lot about these these buzzworthy, like trendy themes that we see around. So like we've talked a lot about like love languages. We've seen a lot of talk about attachment styles recently as well. And I know you touched a little bit on that. And so my question to you would be like, should we be putting a lot of stock into these things? Because there are a lot of people out there that make like their love language, their entire personality. Like, are these things really important to factor into any kind of relationship you enter into?
It's just a personal opinion, but I think the love languages or attachment styles or, the new buzzwords of the day, like I know imposter syndrome used to be big a few years back and that's kind of died out. It all, again, I think points to the same root of having unmet needs as children, having those needs then still needing to be met as adults. And then we seek out these relationships that kind of mirror the unmet love and unmet needs that we had as a child. So a lot of times, without consciously thinking about it, we will end up dating, at least our first choices in romantic relationships, we'll end up dating a version of a parent, either side, because we're just seeking to resolve those old storylines. So whether you want to look at we'll call them issues, or look at your challenges as, well, it's because of this love, I seek this love language, or it's because I have this attachment style. It's just another way of viewing, what your needs are. And if it keeps things interesting for people, I'm all about it. I love attachment theory. I love the love languages and talking in that way. I like talking about your love language as a child, actually, where it's not so neat and tidy, where whatever happened in the home, that was perceived as love. So it could be emotional neglect. Let's say both parents had to work outside the home, or let's say, maybe one parent was even a little more harsh or maybe narcissistic, and just for whatever reason, you didn't have your emotional needs met. Then as an adult, that would be kind of your love language, where you meet a person who kind of neglects your emotional needs, and it doesn't register as an alarm going off like a red flag. It's more like, oh, this is normal. This is expected. And in that way, this is how we kind of fall into those patterns of a lifetime of unmet needs if we're not conscious of it. But yeah, I love the new personality theories, and attachment theory has actually gained some traction as a more legitimate, shall we say, theory when it comes to psychology, but it's not listed in the DSM. It's not widely recognized as an official theory when it comes to psychology.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So that the whole thing about you saying like, like you subconsciously might date a parent or be okay with like the love that you received as a child. Is that where the whole like I can fix him philosophy comes from too?
Yep. Yep. Yeah, we all do it. We all just gravitate towards what's familiar to us. So, in my work, I like to incorporate something that Gabor Mate speaks a lot about, which is compassionate curiosity. Like, we're so hard on ourselves and maybe others, friends, like, why are you dating that person who's so abusive? Or why do you keep dating people who cheat on you? And we just feel so much shame around it. But when you can look at these situations and challenges with the lens of compassion, like, oh, you seek people who are abusive or seek people who treat you poorly in relationships because you are still trying to resolve that love that you were always seeking. And so why wouldn't you try to search and receive that kind of love? So
Wow.
there's always a reason for why we do things, and it's never from weakness or stupidity or whatnot. People don't want to ruin their lives. We want to make good choices, but sometimes we're affected by the past.
And you also mentioned being too judgmental. So we wanted to ask you as well about red flags. This is like another really popular thing right now. You have red flags, green flags. Are we all just too picky these days? Do you feel like we're setting unrealistic standards for the people that we do associate with?
Well, I think that you can look at your pattern in dating. And if your pattern is not so great, then I think it's reasonable and probably advisable to seek friends who know you well, who have some maturity, who are grounded themselves, because you want to make sure you're vetting the people who are giving you advice, and to be able to take in that kind of feedback. Because we all have blind spots. And if you have people who are loving, who are your well-wishers, and they're not jealous, and they will give you good advice and help you see, maybe, point out those blind spots, then sure, we all need a support system. We all need community. And red flags, I mean, there are ways to objectively look at red flags. So I find that it's less about seeing the red flags and more about acknowledging that the color of the flag, shall we say. So I think everybody, when they look back on a relationship, they will then admit that, oh yeah, that was a red flag. But in the beginning, when we're still seeking out that love that we never got, we take those rose-colored lenses and kind of color things up when they shouldn't be. So
yeah, it's interesting you bring up trusting friends to give you some feedback, because I recently went through this with a friend of mine who I saw red flags with the person that he was dating, but he was happy, or at least he seemed happy. So who am I to say, no, there's some problems with this person? If they seem happy, that should be all that matters to me. At least I thought. But then once they did end up breaking up and I started telling him the red flags I was seeing, he did tell me, please tell me about this going forward. But it's just, it felt out of line for me.
And he would not have accepted it. When you're in that honeymoon phase, we just, a friend used to tell me, do you want to know what you should do or what you're going to do? And people are generally just going to do what they're going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another hot button issue right now is politics. We've heard from a number of people who've chosen to cut ties with friends and family over political differences. Should politics be a legit deal breaker? And do you ever have couples come to you about how to work through political differences between themselves?
Interesting that you ask about politics specifically, and also interesting to me that I don't have that come up as a specific topic.
Oh.
There's
Wow,
Really?
finances,
Yeah, that's so
there's
interesting.
jealousy. Yeah, yeah. Now that you mention it, it's like, why hasn't this come up? Especially, with all the controversy, whether you love him or hate him, of the current president. Yeah, I am
Right.
surprised that's not more of a topic, but I would approach that the same way that I would approach any subject, and that is, do you feel understood? I break arguments down into basically two steps. Do you feel understood? And there are exercises and empathy exercises to kind of work through that. And then the second step is expressing your needs, the solutions piece. So even if you come from opposite sides of the spectrum when it comes to politics, being able to empathize. And empathy is all about focusing on the person's feelings about the thing, not necessarily their thoughts and judgments and conclusions, but how they feel about something. And so you could say, well, the current president, when he says this, it makes me feel enraged because I grew up with an oppressive father figure who did this and that. And so you could talk more about the feeling of what this person represents for you, which will more easily invite more empathy from your partner versus this person is this and this and this because of this reason. And when you just say, like point the finger, you're going to tend to lose people. So it's just whatever the issue or the topic is, you approach it the same, or I approach it the same way.
I think maybe if we were to look at this through maybe a more broad lens, like I could imagine families sometimes creating conflict between couples in a way that politics kind of could. Like if, different families have different expectations of the couple and like how involved the family should be in their affairs and vice versa. Is that something that you see with couples a lot?
Yes, this is a very big topic, especially mothers. Um, and you have to be so careful when you're in a relationship, and that, this comes up as an issue a lot for people pleasers and peacekeepers, where they're used to keeping everybody happy. But then all of a sudden you get a spouse or a partner and then a parent or a sibling, and now you have to choose. When those two, don't agree on wanting the same things, you have to choose, and it puts you in an awkward position. But this is again a personal opinion, you really need to put your romantic relationship, like if it's a serious relationship, a little bit ahead of the family, because this is your intimate, immediate family now with your spouse. Maybe you have children. And it's a very difficult thing to do for people pleasers and peacekeepers.
Amen to that.
You mentioned that you're not seeing couples bring politics up to you. I'm wondering if that's because when they start dating, they know what they're getting into. In their first few dates, they're learning about it. And once they become committed, they know that maybe they do disagree politically, but they are just going to deal with it. It is what it is. Because I've also, sorry to bring a dating reality show into this, but a big subject of the latest season of Love is Blind, there's been a lot of butting heads over politics, and they decide to not get married because of politics. So I'm wondering if people are just asking these questions up front more often these days because of how vastly different people's opinions can be.
Yeah. Yeah, I think politics are such a good representation of a person's values. And that's ultimately what we're talking about with any issue, especially politics, is what do you value? What's important to you? And perhaps it's, more traditional values. Perhaps it's lower taxes, financial security. Perhaps it's, having a strong male figure. Perhaps it's having trauma come out from being disempowered. And then this public figure really reminds you of that. Or being disempowered and this public figure makes you feel safer. So both sides of the coin. And I've seen all kinds of reactions to our current president. And it's interesting. It really pulls out and exposes what people's ultimate values are. And if it causes so much strain in the relationship, for sure, you should not get married. Not because it's just politics, but because it's representing your deeper values in life.
Yeah. 100%. Well, speaking of what's going on in the world, are you hearing from couples worried about maybe planning for the future with everything that's going on today? And does it impact how they are moving forward together, specifically when it comes to kids or getting married or purchasing property, buying a house together. Are you seeing stuff like this come up?
Still very rare that people will bring up finances. Mostly because when you're in that 911 mode of trying to save the relationship, it's more about what you're fighting about, like house chores and taking care of the kids and being dismissed or disrespected. It's less about how do we save for retirement. When I get couples who are more in the planning, in the premarital, we'll call it, it's kind of a dated phrase, but premarital stage, that's when they'll start talking about money and do we have a joint checking account? What does retirement look like? But it's very rare for people to come to me for that kind of advice. And I think that for the most part, if I look at friends, if I look at clients, people, I'm not saying this is good, but people kind of think, we'll work it out when it comes to things like money and investments and retirement. And that's not necessarily the greatest approach because, as they say, sex and money are one of the two top things that couples will ultimately fight about in the end. And so you can look at things like spending habits. You can look at samplings of how a person acts right now to give you a better idea of what the financial relationship would look like in the future. You have some data there, is what I'm saying, to kind of put pieces together of what life would be like financially.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we had a listener feedback episode last week, and we got an email from a listener that we tried to answer ourselves for this listener because they're going through kind of a rough patch with their partner. So we thought we could pose this email to you as well and see what you think the answer might be. So this anonymous email came in, and they were talking about how their partner's decision to start driving for Uber has become a source of frustration for them because they don't spend as much time together anymore. As a result. And the person who wrote into us said that their partner seemed unwilling to change their work schedule. They had a very particular work schedule. And remember, this is Uber, so the hours are flexible. And now because this person's partner is unwilling to budge on the work schedule and they see each other for only a limited amount of time, this person is debating ending the relationship. So what do you think of this? Is this an issue when this person who's driving for Uber seems to be prioritizing their Uber career over their relationship and not willing to budge?
I mean, I have so many questions.
Yeah, that was kind of us
So
too.
did we.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I have a feeling that this Uber driver, this may be some sort of relief. Like the first thing we're all going to go to is like, oh, it must be paying the bills more. But the inflexibility about around the scheduling, because you brought up a great point. Why not just change the schedule around a little bit? That to me symbols a bit of resentment, perhaps unstated, granted. And whenever there's resistance to resolving issues, resistance to conversations about things, it's usually because, part of it is not having the tools, but mostly it's because of resentment and digging in their heels, like, nope, I'm going to do this. And I don't know, perhaps the Uber driver feels like they're in a parent-child relationship and this is one thing, you cannot tell me what to do, and this is my little bit of freedom. And people just like run with things like this. And now he's got this, is it he, she, I don't know. Now they've got this either. Uber job where it gives them time away from the home. Maybe there's more argument, because if the writer is saying, I'm thinking about ending this relationship, obviously they're not in a great space.
Yeah.
So not being heard, not being validated, no communication back and forth, no compromising. It's not a great situation.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was thinking too, from the angle of the Uber driver. If they're not willing to change at all, I think that has to tell you how they are feeling about this current relationship. They don't seem interested in improving it when it's important to the other person that they make some adjustments. Well, thank you for your feedback on that.
Sounds like a classic avoidant trait, anxious trait kind of dynamic, like chasing after and they're avoiding. And
yeah, I think we're gonna have to take an attachment style quiz next on this show, because I don't think
I know
the three
we
of us
haven't
have done that, but
yet.
that's come up quite a few times this episode. So maybe it's time.
I'm going to be exposed for my attachment style.
I can ask you a couple of questions to get to the heart of it. Like during conflict, do you tend to want to resolve it right away, like talk it out right away? Or do you prefer some downtime? You maybe get a little quieter, need a break? That's one big question. And another question is, when you have conflict, do you tend to blame yourself or the other person? Like, oh, they're doing this and they're doing that. Or is it like, I'm not good enough, they're going to leave me?
Ooh.
I tend to stew and stay quiet, and then I I need a little time to think it through. I need some space, but I think I am very fair in terms of talking through an argument. Like I try to see both sides of it. To answer your second question,
So you might lean a little more towards avoidant.
yep, sounds right.
I kind of go back and forth because if the argument's already in progress and the person wants to walk away, that enrages me more, because then it just feels like you're not listening to me, or you just want to leave because like you're wrong and you just don't want me to win.
And do you go after them, or do you then also go to your corner?
I will, and then I won't. And then, but the thing that upsets me more than anything is like, then if the person decides that they're done being angry and I'm still angry because you didn't let me finish my, upset. Does that make sense?
For people who have a little bit of both, that's more like fearful avoidant. That's a third type. So yeah, that's the most common type, by the way.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. Yeah, Pam's like, I wasn't done with you yet.
Well, like it's like if you already started the argument in progress, why aren't we just finishing the argument? That's my whole thing. Maybe that's too aggressive. I don't know.
They get the zinger in and then they walk away.
Pretty much. How about you, Laura?
Yeah, I think for me, I tend to get easily overwhelmed, especially if I feel really strongly about something. So I feel like I'm more likely to go into a shutdown state. And then what was the other?
Do you find yourself blaming yourself more or blaming them more?
Oh, definitely blaming myself. 100%.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're probably a little more in the fearful avoidant as well.
That sounds right.
We have a listener who's listening live right now, Roshni. She said, is it bad to say I need a minute to think about it? And no, it can't be, right?
No.
You want to collect your thoughts.
Not at all. Yeah. The problem is it will tend to trigger people who lean more towards anxious traits, that just any sign of abandonment, any sign of walking away can just, it just triggers things in them, but both types, people who lean more toward avoidant, more towards anxious, they always find each other. So, but yes, asking for breaks is good. De-escalation is a skill in and of itself.
Well, to kind of wrap things up and end things on a bit of a lighter note, for anybody that is listening that is in a long-term relationship, we also wanted to ask you about just rekindling those relationships, because obviously long-term relationships require maintenance and you really need to work on them. So what would you say is the best way to tackle that and make sure that, things are running smoothly if you want them to keep running smoothly?
I would say that addressing any resentments that you have in the relationship, and, you can ask yourself, well, do I have any resentments that are a problem? And whenever a big fight comes up, what do you find yourself going to? And what do you, I call it the kitchen sink, or people call it the kitchen sink, where you have a disagreement about one thing, maybe a dirty coffee cup in the sink, and then all of a sudden it turns into, and then this happened, 3 years ago, and then you did this the week before our wedding, and then all this stuff, to where now you just have a bunch of stuff that's been pushed under the rug. And so addressing resentments is the first thing, because it'll just keep people kind of at a distance. Another thing is learning how to be friends again. So a lot of these card games, they're kind of cheesy at times, but some of the questions are really good for icebreakers and conversation starters, card games for couples. There are different versions out there. But things like that to kind of move the conversation to a deeper, more intimate level where you can rekindle that friendship.
That's good to hear that you do like those card games. I don't know the name of it, but I know a couple who use an app, and I think it does similar things where maybe it asks a question through the app and then you both answer, and then maybe you can read each other's answers or something like that.
Oh, that's
good
cool.
To know. Yeah,
that is cool.
Good to know that type of thing can work. It's interesting to me too, Kim, that you've actually mentioned like chores coming up in disagreements a few times. It just sort of surprises me that can really maybe spark a deeper argument, something as kind of like surface level. Like
Well,
I'm a neat freak,
That
so
makes
I
sense.
get it.
I was just
but-
going to say, because we were just talking about this last week.
No, don't come that. No. I was complaining about my partner's permanent piles of clothes.
I wasn't
that
even
never
going to
improved.
throw Pat under the rug. I was going to say that I said that I sometimes leave cups lying around, and I know that would piss Andrew off so hard.
Yeah. Is it because when it comes to like chores and cleanliness, Kim, that people aren't changing their behaviors and it just wears you down over time?
No, there's so many things that factor in it. I should have mentioned this as one of the hot button topics for what couples come to me for. House chores is, I would put her right up there, if not at the top of the list, for
Wow.
the uneven
Wow.
distribution, for people not being consistent, and it just touches, once again, I like getting to the root of the problem. So what is the root of it? It's, I feel unappreciated. I feel I do more in this relationship. It could be something more ADHD related where, something like daily washing of the dishes or laundry isn't going to move the needle much, but you get something, but novelty and urgency like, ooh, I'm going to build a patio. And then all of a sudden they get hyper focused on that and then they're all about it. So, there could be attention issues, there could be memory issues like I didn't remember that I left that coffee cup on the counter. I'm sorry. And they genuinely didn't remember. So you just have to know what the nature of the person is, talk it through, and keep talking and finding that compromise because it is such a hot button topic.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
That last one is me. That I didn't remember I left it there. That's
Yeah.
me.
Laura.
Yeah, you're not trying to purposely make your partner's like
genuinely,
miserable.
it's like genuinely I lost my coffee and I was sad about it, so I made a new cup of coffee.
No, that'll be good for people to hear too, because I think sometimes you think you're going through issues that only you and your partner are going through, but that type of issue is so common and causes a lot of issues for people. I don't know, like I hear this issue come up in relationships, but I guess I wouldn't have expected it to reach the level of bringing it up to my relationship coach. So I think
I've had a client, they've been married for 8 years, and she sent him a picture of the way the dishwasher should be loaded. So now he references the picture before he loads the dishwasher. It got to that point.
I gotta admit, Pat and I have criticized each other's dishwashing loading habits, but I haven't taken a picture yet of how I disagree.
Well, maybe you should both take pictures and compare and contrast.
Yeah.
And even like you call yourself a neat freak, but even our needs for order and tidiness, again, you go to the root of it. It
Yeah.
probably offered you a lot of soothing. And it was something that you could control in your life when maybe other areas of your life were out of control. And so we need to also respect people's needs in that way. That it's not just some random thing you chose to do. Like, I'm going to choose to be a neat freak. It offers you a lot of comfort. And if that's a core need of yours, why not try to meet it? But also when it comes to house chores, if you need the bathroom cleaned a certain way and your partner is not going to do it the way you want to, then maybe you should be the one who cleans the bathroom.
Yeah. No, that's such a great point. And like I work from home full time. So to your point about why I need things clean, it helps create, I want my space orderly. I want to have a clean place to look at all day, every day, and it just helps keep my mental health in check to an extent as well, having a clean and organized space. Yeah. Well, Kim, this has been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You actually have a book out, right?
I'm finishing right now,
okay.
due to the publisher in a couple months. So
Awesome.
I'm coming up to the wire. But yeah, it should be released next spring, actually.
And what can you tell us a little bit about the book?
It is going to be a book about, the first half is more introspection about why we get triggered, ways to put the pieces together of how you show up in a relationship. And then the second half of the book is how you then approach conflict in a relationship, knowing, what your lens is, how you come wired into a relationship.
Oh, fantastic. Well,
Yeah.
we will definitely pick that up when it is released. In the meantime, where can our listeners find you online?
You can find me on Instagram. It's KP, my initials, KP_counseling. Or my website, kimpolinder.com. And I do virtual cohorts, virtual webinars 4 times a year. So trying to reach larger groups now.
Oh,
Yeah.
very cool. We'll have to check
Yeah.
that out.
Yeah. Well, thank you again so much, Kim, for all your insight today. We really appreciate it.
This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, this was so great.
So listeners, we hope you enjoyed that conversation with Kim. We definitely did. And be sure to check out her website. We have a link in the show notes. Did you two learn a bunch today? I feel like I did.
Oh,
yeah.
definitely.
And Pam, we do need to do that discussion around attachment styles. I think,
Yeah.
like you mentioned.
Put it in the Slack. I'm sure we can find a good quiz.
Yeah. Before we get to some recommendations, we want to offer our listeners some reminders.
Become our favorite pal at patreon.com/millennial. Once you support us, you'll be able to listen to our weekly gossip sessions known as After Dark, which is also known as our podcasting safe space. And you can hear that all in your favorite podcast app.
Coming up in After Dark this week, we are going to follow up on last week's discussion about our own red flags. Enough criticizing ourselves. We let it all out last week. It was a lot of fun, too. And I think we were kind of like therapists for each other because we were assuring each other that, A, we weren't alone in holding these red flags, but also that we here on the panel have similar red flags as each other. But anyway, this week's After Dark is going to be a follow-up to last week, and we're going to talk about some of the worst red flags we've seen in other people and red flags we've heard stories about from our friends. So another gossipy edition of After Dark coming up this week.
You'll also be able to hang out with us on Zoom if you sign up for our Patreon. You can get ad-free episodes as well, hear old episodes of Smart Mounts, listen to recordings of us calling each other monthly, and tons more.
Also, an update on the Smart Mouths episodes. I recently found a way to access all the old Smart Mouths show notes that we would publish back in the day.
Oh.
Yeah, so in addition to the planning docs when we have them, we're also sharing the show notes and the original title and release date. So this is turning into a nice formal archive for Smart Mouths because this stuff has not been available online in years and years.
And don't forget, Patreon offers 7-day free trials and annual subscription discounts as well.
If you're an Apple Podcast user and you'd prefer to support us through there, you can just tap into the show and sign up for Mega Millennial. It'll get you After Dark and ad-free episodes. Time for recommendations. What do you have for us, Pam?
I wanted to recommend the website Azazie.com if you ever have to be a bridesmaid and you have a very nice bride that's like just pick a dress that you like that's in this color family. There's a bunch of these sites out there right now, but I really liked like the speed at which they sent over try-on dresses. You can try on like up to 6 for $10 each. And so that gives you a really good sense of like how the dress is going to look on you. They're pretty size inclusive. They have all different kinds of like materials and fabrics. And most of the dresses, at least from what I've seen, are like $200 at most, which is really nice because weddings are expensive, especially if you are, you know, taking part in it in a larger way. So save yourself some money and check out some of these sites that make it really easy for you to like dress yourself for the occasion.
Cool. I am going to preface this recommendation by saying this also doubles as a teaser for an announcement we're going to be making concerning Millennial and the branding in the weeks ahead. But I want to recommend the literal app Touch Grass. Now, I have recommended on this show this brick device to block apps on your phone, and you have to physically tap your phone to the brick device to unlock your app. So it's a nice way to block all these apps from your phone while you're out and about, and then you get home and you can unblock the apps. But now this app takes this idea a step further. You can use this app to block, let's say, social media apps, communication apps, games, etc. And you can't unlock these apps until you go outside and take a picture of you literally touching grass.
What?
It's genius. Why didn't I think of this? Damn it. The app is free, but the free version has a limited number of features. But this is a fun new way to try and rid yourself of your social media addiction. You will not, if you set up this app, you will not be able to access Instagram until you go outside and touch grass.
That's very cool. I need to get that.
Yeah, you should try it.
I definitely should. I'm spending way too much time paying attention to the news right now. Unfortunately, my recommendation is news related, but I think it's a very positive news spin. I want to recommend Straight Arrow News. It is a news network that is basically brought together by a small team of independent reporters, journalists, and producers from across the political spectrum and from various networks, including CNN, Fox News, USA Today, and others. And they do a really good job of approaching news from a very middle of the road perspective, but they also have this really cool media miss section that they include where they'll highlight stories and reporting that has been missed in a lot of mainstream media outlets. So you should definitely give it a look.
It's time for a couple more reminders before we wrap up today. Visit shop.millennialshow to pick up official Millennial swag. Also, follow the show in your favorite podcast app or on YouTube, and please do leave us a review.
And leave comments wherever you follow us or email millennialshow@gmail.com. Millennialshow.com is where you'll find links to our various platforms and notes on what we've discussed today.
After Dark starts in a moment for patrons and Apple Podcast subscribers. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I'm Andrew.
I'm Laura.
And I'm Pamela.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.